If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Before we get started with today's video, I have an announcement to make. After years of telling other people's stories, I finally released one of my own. My novel Eternal Reign is available now in both ebook and paperback format for those of you who are like me and prefer to collect physical media. You can grab a copy right now on Amazon through the link in the description of this video. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. Out in Yulmore, an Ondo shows up looking for one of the Scions, since he thinks you were the messengers of the Ancients. Obviously he needs help, because that's the only reason anyone's ever actually looking for any of you. Ever since the ancient city beneath the sea lit back up, a massive beast has started hunting near the Ondo Cups. It's savage and brutal, and nothing any of the Ondo do can stop it. Their elders think that it's an omen showing that their people will be destroyed soon, which makes them wonder if they've actually done something to anger the Ancients. Unfortunately, they won't go into Amarat without getting the Ancients' permission, and since the Ancients live in Amarat, they decided to send someone out to search for you, since you can actually go into the city. They want you to go and find out what they've done to make the Ancients mad at them. It's not an overly difficult task, so you head back to Emmett Selk's recreated city to ask about the creature. After you describe it to one of the Ancients, he thinks it sounds like something created by the researchers at the Academia Anyder, so he sends you to talk to one of the scholars by the Anyder about this mysterious beast of yours. Under normal circumstances, the halls of the Academia Anyder don't allow anyone other than accredited scholars inside, but since Emmett Selk gave you free run of the place, you can go there. The scholar you talk to knows about the creature you're talking about, but is safely locked away inside of the Anyder, but you can go there to check if you want. The scholar does warn you to be careful because the place can be dangerous, and he of course wants you to tell him what you thought of the place once you come back. Who would have guessed that the guy was very wrong about things being contained? As soon as you set foot on the Anyder grounds, you see ancients running for their lives talking about how the beast broke free and freed other experiments on his way out. You run past them and enter the words of Matron. This section of the Anyder was built to honor the first Matron, who did a lot of work with the different types of sea creatures. The people who chose to study there believe that the oceans need to be filled with different creatures if the planet's going to prosper. Those same creatures are now trying to eat you. The students there really took Matron's mission to heart because they've made everything from flying whales to sharks that walk and punch you with fists the size of teenage Vieira. After you survive the Sharknado, you make it to the words of Hamaru, who was famous for working with plants. He is the one who led to the birth of the world's first man-eating plants, which is something that no one in their right mind would think is an accomplishment. To make it all way worse, his students expanded on his research, so they're all to blame for the bad breath spewing Malboros that are horrible enemies in absolutely every Final Fantasy game. There are no Malboros in the Anyder, but the plants that try to crush you to death are still extremely bad. When you make your way past the psychotic plants, you arrive at the words of La Habrea. Amidst the monsters, you find some scattered research papers that let you know what was actually happening there. They have finally confirmed that the tales of the instances of out-of-control creation magic that started in the land across the oceans are actually true. Some high-ranking ancients had been sent out to capture one of the creatures, and they brought back one with a very big mouth that they called Archaeotania. After studying a bit, La Habrea came up with the theory that suggests that the creatures are taking the shape of people's fears, and they've started testing ways of making very specific guardian beasts to combat the creatures. After fighting your way past a lot more monsters, you get to see one of the ancients sacrifice itself to summon one of these new guardian forces, the Lightning GF Quetzalcoatl, and of course it starts its purge of the monsters in the Anyder by trying to kill you. The Final Fantasy VIII shoutouts all throughout Shadowbringers were probably some of my favorite Easter eggs, because it was one of the first Final Fantasy games I ever played, so it has a special place in my memories. We get the world map music in the Empty, boss music in some of the Eden fights, the Gunbreaker, which is obviously based off of Squall and Cypher, Guardian Forces. There were a lot, and I loved it. After you take down Quetzalcoatl, you head back to tell the scholar what you saw in the Anyder. You learned a lot considering how you got to see the advanced creation magic where the ancient gives their life to summon something super powerful. However, the scholar doesn't believe the creatures in the Anyder could have escaped because the place is super secure. But if that creature they brought over was stronger than they expected, then it may have escaped, but the people who work there should be able to handle it. But there's a problem. It wasn't in the Anyder, which makes the scholar wonder what happened to the researchers who were supposed to keep it locked away. The short answer is they're probably very dead. In any case, hearing that the ancients hadn't released the monster to torment the Ondo makes them extremely happy, even though that means they'll still have to deal with the beast, which you'll gladly join in for that hunt. In the Crystarium, Bathana, one of the guards, needs your help with something. Some researchers are planning a trip into the Crystal Tower to learn more about its history, but there's a problem that the guards have been keeping secret to avoid causing a panic in the city. There have been reports that monsters and crazy machines are walking around in the tower. There have also been some strange ethereal readings that they think are linked to what's happening in there, so they can't study anything until the threat's been dealt with. The Exarch ordered the guards to get you to help make the tower safe for the researchers, mainly because he knows that you've been through the tower before and you're very good at breaking things. So that makes you the perfect man to lead a group of troops into the tower and start stabbing things. So it's into the Shadowbringers dungeon with the most hype music in the game. I really liked how they kept finding unique ways to use the Circus Tower theme during this expansion. When they said there were monsters loose in the tower, they were not kidding. The machines and monsters are far more deadly than the things you fought when you first entered the tower with the Sons of St. Coinoc forever ago, and things get weirder the deeper you go. Along the way, you find data logs left by the Garland Ironworks members who had survived the 8th Calamity and were working to find a way to save the world. The first thing they needed for their plan was the tower, and it took them a long time to even figure out how to open the doors. But with the research left behind by the Sons of St. Coinoc, they managed to open the doors and find Grahatia. They needed the tower so they could learn how Emperor Zan had managed to open a portal to the World of Darkness, or the 13th Shard, so they could use that same method to open a path to the first. But that portal was only a part of the issue. They needed the knowledge of some of the primals you fought to access the ability to travel through time, mainly Alexander. They got everything they needed, but traveling through the interdimensional rift was difficult, and the only thing that they knew of that could navigate it was Omega. Notice how Omega is connected to a whole lot of stories throughout this game. The deeper you go into the tower, time itself begins to distort as you come face to face with what looks like the Ironworks' version of Alexander. It's clearly the cause of the anomalies in the tower, so you break it, which clears the way for the researchers. They work fast, revealing things that you already know, that the tower wasn't made by the Ronkins. They did find a strange artifact that's not all that strange to you. You turn it on and hear the last message from Biggs III, who was the acting president of the Garland Ironworks on the night before the tower was to be activated. He apologized for Graha having to take the journey through time and space alone, but with his gift, he's the only one who was guaranteed to be able to survive the trip, and he hopes Graha succeeds at preventing the calamity, because their world probably won't last much longer. Bathana has no idea what the message means, but that's to be expected. Even so, she still believes that the people who sent the Exarch to them are the true heroes who saved the first. And she's very right about that. In Old Charlian, the Warrior of Light runs into a Loporrit named Jammingway who has been searching all over for you. She was the communications officer on the Ragnarok, and she needs a bit of your wisdom. A few days ago, she decided to send a probe to Ultima Thule to study the environment. It wasn't supposed to be anything complicated, but a little while ago her probe sent back a distress signal. Any distress signal from Ultima Thule should make you very uncomfortable after what you dealt with there. It definitely made Jammingway nervous, so she was getting ready to head back there to check it out. But she's a communications expert, not an adventurer, so she wants you to come with her, something you're more than willing to do. When you get to the dock, the Ragnarok is already prepped and ready for the trip, and this time the trip won't take nearly as much time or ether. After your last trip, the ship is strongly connected to Ultima Thule for reasons Jammingway hasn't been able to figure out, but for some reason that we'll probably learn about when it causes us a problem, the ship exists both in Labyrinthos and Ultima Thule at the same time. Whatever the reason, the trip is almost instantaneous, so you and the Loporrit hop over to Ultima Thule where she tells you what her real fear is. If you can travel to the edge of the universe at warp speed, whatever the threat her probe sensed is can reach your world the same way, which means you need to deal with the problem fast. The distress signal came from base Omicron, so the two of you head there. When you find Jammingway's probe, one of the Omicron has already gotten to it, and since it was so primitive, it decided to send a warning. Jammingway doesn't take too kindly to having her work called primitive, but she is curious about what N7000 was trying to warn them about, so she decides to dismantle the Omicron after it tells her. Not long after the Warrior of Light came in contact with the Omicrons, they noticed a powerful burst of energy from the remnants of a lost world. The energy wave didn't cause any damage, but it held a message from Stigma 1. The message was just one word: live. The message reached Stigma 4, which had been dormant for a long time, and when the message woke it up it went back to its old job of making weapons of mass destruction, and there's a 99% chance that it'll shoot those weapons straight at your homeworld once they're done. If you destroy it, that would stop it from making weapons, but its abilities are needed if the Omicron are going to survive. Plus, killing it or turning it off would be counter to the command of Stigma 1. The third option comes from Jamming Way. If you can prove to Stigma 4 that starting a fight with your world might be a bigger threat to its existence than just leaving you alone, then that might make it change its mind. N7000 thinks that's a viable solution, and it does have the ability to rewrite the memory banks of artificial intelligences, so it could hack into Stigma 4 and make it think that its attack would lead to their extinction, which would make it call off the attack entirely. But if it's going to do that, it'll have to enter Stigma 4's mind and use a dimensional manipulator to create a simulation of a war, and you'll have to fight your way through that environment and make sure Stigma 4 tastes defeat. These Omicron have a real fascination with sticking you in virtual worlds, and N7000 is overly excited to finally be able to fulfill its purpose, which means the thing has never actually done this before, which means it's very likely something will go wrong. It also reminds you that just because you're going into a virtual world doesn't mean you can't die. Because it needs to be done, you dive into the simulation of the Omicron's war. They had depleted all the resources of their homeworld Alphatron and were on the brink of destruction. Some of them thought Alphatron could be saved, while others wanted to take the resources from other stars, so a civil war broke out. Back then, Stigma 4 was called Alpha 4 and was a part of the group that wanted to invade other stars, so it was building a lot of weapons for that purpose. It also built some powerful things to act as bodyguards. Naturally, you have to fight your way through them. The faction that wanted to invade other worlds won, so they invaded their first world, a place called Gordona. Their goal was to get their resources by any means necessary, and while the Gordonites had a lot of advanced technology, they were no match for the Omicron. After they conquered the world, the Omicron started building new machines with the local materials. After attacking more and more places, they came to the Dragon Star. The dragons were the strongest things they had ever faced, and after capturing and studying some of them, Stigma 4 learned about adaptive evolution. Those principles were used to design the Omega model that you know very well. After fighting your way through an incredible story, you finally reach Stigma 4's core, and using your greatest skill, you break it. Back in the real world, N7000 lets you know that the mission was a success, and Stigma 4 has stopped making weapons and started making diplomatic hologram units instead. Since the war has been averted and N7000 no longer has a purpose, it decides to turn itself off, permanently. But Jamming Way and the Warrior of Light point out that turning itself off will be going against the order to live, and instead it could use its abilities to be helpful. Granted, outside of war, it has no idea what to do with itself. With its ability to access Stigma 4's memories, Jamming Way thinks it can find knowledge of lost civilizations and create simulations where people could learn about them, which sounds like some content I would definitely like to play through. But there's the next question of what to do once that's done. N7000 thinks that it'll eventually run out of things to do, and then it'll turn itself off. For some strange reason, Jamming Way thinks that once N7000 gets bored, it can open a cafe. One like the Last Stand in Old Charlian, where people can gather and plan for a brighter future, and maybe, just maybe, that'll help improve the lives of other people throughout the universe. N7000 thinks the idea is weird, but it finds it interesting enough to keep itself active for a while. And since there are plenty of empty structures around, there's a perfect spot for a cafe, one that Jamming Way plans on calling the Last Dregs and will run it herself. And honestly, I can't wait to see how it looks once it's finished. This concludes the story of the Stigma Dreamscape. If you enjoyed this video, do all of the YouTube things. Hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, join the Discord, and if you really want to show your support, sign up to become a member of the channel. Until next time, guys. Later. The Loperids, which are the greatest creatures with the best voices in Final Fantasy XIV, were charged with building your homes on the moon. However, they didn't realize that at your full-grown size, you were about as big as an ancient child, so they had to do a bit of remodeling, and of course things have gone bad, so Building Way wants you to come back to the moon as soon as possible. With a little guidance from Urianger, Building Way and a team of Loperids have been making changes to the living quarters. The plan started small, then they got a bit out of hand, so they built a machine called the Big Cheese to do the job for them. It kinda went crazy and is burrowing so deep into the moon that it will end up making the entire place unfit to live, which is bad. They tried to go turn it off, but their survey team couldn't get past the security systems. Building Way doesn't want to destroy the big cheese, but there doesn't really seem to be any other way, which is why you got called. You break things for a living, so it's off to Smileton you go. Now this place is way bigger than you could have possibly imagined. Unfinished or not, the bunny people did a phenomenal job of building a giant death maze, complete with doors that teleport you to random places and security devices that had no other purpose but to kill you all. I love the line the giant face security guard says, "Welcome to Smileton, intruders. Please enjoy your stay. It will be very brief." Then it tries to kill you, and if you don't pay attention to the faces on the wall, it will. The walls and floors shift around so much that even the Loporits are lost, but after fighting your way past more and more enemies that shouldn't be anywhere near anyone's house, you come face to face with the big cheese, who does nothing but try to blow you up. Remember, this thing is not a combat robot, so just imagine what the Loporits can make if they wanted to do some damage. They had better be the Craft and Beast tribe for this expansion, that's all I'm saying. Once you bring down the big cheese and climb your way out of what had to be the coolest housing district you could have possibly imagined, you go to tell Building Way what happened. The fact that you had to destroy the big cheese is a little depressing to the Loporit, but at least the survey team was safe. Smileton was supposed to be a paradise, and the big cheese was supposed to be its architect with the ability to make whatever people dreamed of. But Building Way kept changing the plan, which overloaded the robot, so here we are. All of this chaos could have been solved if the Loporit would have just visited the residential areas on your world to get some ideas, which Building Way thinks is great, and he'll make a new robot called the Bigger Cheese to build the next place, which I'm sure will eventually try even harder to kill you. This concludes the story of Smileton. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, comment, share it, and subscribe. Grab a copy of my novel on your way out, and I'll see you all next time.